Hi everyone, my name is Tricia Lyons and I'm here to say just a few short things about this book, The Evangelist Breviary. I just want you to know that this is a book that I wrote quite recently to go along with a course I'm teaching here at Virginia Theological Seminary. I'm teaching a course in the spring that runs from February 1st to the first week in May on evangelism, theologies of evangelism, the history of it, practices of it. And while I was preparing for that course, I decided I wanted to find somewhere, written by someone, a good daily devotional, something that my students could be reading that wasn't about our course necessarily, but was actually an experience of spiritual challenge and growth, and that we could share it as a class if we all agreed to get the same daily devotional and do it together. So you'd have the academic thing going on in the class, and then you'd also have this sort of deeply personal reflection going on perhaps every day if a student had time for it. So as I was getting the syllabus together for the course, I went on Amazon and searched publishing websites and tried to find a good daily devotional that would hit on the rhythms of life that I think are important for evangelism, for a kind of life-giving, life-affirming, post-colonial evangelism. And I actually didn't find one. I mean, there are just so many different kinds of daily devotionals you can follow, but I couldn't find one that was aimed at really feeding someone who wanted their faith to feed other people. A kind of devotional that would bring a person deeper in their faith in ways that would allow anyone around them to be challenged or dared to go deeper into their faith. So I finally decided just to write one. So this is what I did, and I made it available to students. And what happened was other people who were not in the class through the whole Facebook universe in the church heard about it and ordered it themselves. And I was sort of surprised how many people actually wound up buying this book that was originally meant to be a devotional for an academic course here at Virginia Theological Seminary. And I think that by the first day that it was actually available on Amazon, it became #1 on Amazon in books on evangelism, which really taught me that there is a great need, a longing for this kind of daily resource in evangelism. So all the proceeds of this book actually are going to go to the Episcopal Church in Navajo land. So they will benefit from the enormous number of people who surprised me and have bought this book off Amazon. There'll be a link at the bottom of this video if you haven't already seen that or want to send it to someone you know. And feel free, if you missed the beginning of it on February 1st, don't worry. Go ahead and order it and just jump in wherever you can. It runs to the beginning of May. Okay, so I just want to say what the parts are. Every day follows the exact same format, and it runs Monday through Friday. So it's not a 7-day devotional. I wanted to give the students a weekend off to do some of the homework that they're going to be assigned in my class and in others. So it runs Monday to Friday. There is one exception. I do have Holy Saturday in here for Holy Week. There aren't readings for Sunday because I trust that someone who would have a book like this would have lots to do on Easter Sunday. But I do have an ancient sermon for Holy Saturday that is just so good. I had to add that. So it's Monday through Friday except Holy Saturday. Okay, very quickly, let's just run through why the days have the components that they do. Every day begins with 3 questions. The first one asks you to come up with one word to describe your relationship with God. One word. The truth is, some people love to journal in our tradition. I love those people. So I'm not a journaler, but I also know the research on the way you get the brain to reflect. Now, for the 5 or 10 or whatever percentage of people who have no problem writing long words on a daily basis in a journal, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the rest of the people who either don't do that or, like me, do it for a day and then the next morning just don't have the energy to do it again. By asking someone to describe their relationship with God, which is the first question every day, describe your relationship with God in one word. What can happen is if you have to come up with one word, you have to actually do a bit of thinking. What is the word that describes my relationship with God right now? It could be something like joyful or confusing or breathtaking or beautiful or painful or sad. But by picking one word, what we know from learning theory is that what will happen is as you pick that word, it sort of begins your thinking during the day. So in some ways, by only putting one word on the page, there's more of a chance that you're going to be thinking more about that one word throughout the day. It sort of spins out because it was so simple and clear and you actually picked up a pen and had to write it. You had to kind of own that's the word. joyful or confusing. And the great thing is usually you no sooner write the word, and a few minutes later as you begin to think about that word you put down, you begin to realize that maybe that isn't the word, or maybe that is the word. So every day, that's the first question, because I find that that's one of the key things if you study people who do evangelism, and I mean all the way back to the Acts of the Apostles, people who are aware of what their relationship is with God at any given moment and have the ability to not say it in 30 or 40 or 50 minutes. One of the things I do love about other traditions like baptism, if you ask them what's their testimony, they can give you a 1-minute version or a 3-minute version or a 10-minute version. Other traditions are sort of better at helping people communicate their faith to people in different size chunks. And quite often with Episcopalians, I find we have great testimonies of how we came to know God through Christ. But quite often when I ask someone a question, 30 minutes later, we're like getting to the really good part. So there's also, frankly, not just our ancient tradition shows us that there's great wisdom to be able to have a sense in any given moment what your relationship with God is. There also is something to be said for learning how to communicate with one word or just a few words. If you read a lot of our liturgies, you see our tradition loves words, and so do I. But to begin every day with one is a good way to start. And you've got the rest of the day to add words to it. The second daily question you're asked every day in this breviary is, what are you grateful for? I probably don't need to tell all of you that if you, again, do research on people from the apostles up to the modern day, people whose faith brings other people to the faith. Now, again, I say faith brings other people to the faith. It's not about talking all the time. There is a certain way of sharing your faith that involves talking, but other people, the way they live, the way they care for creation, there are many different ways that people's faith draws other people to faith. But one of the things you find in all those people usually is a deep spirit of gratefulness. So I ask every single day, one word, something you're grateful for. And again, these look like simple questions. You may open it up and just say, really? Like that's enough to put in a book? Just asking me to describe my relationship with God and something I'm grateful for? Well, this book goes for about 60 or 65 days. That would be 65 times in 65 days that you had to think about something for which you are grateful. Over time, my friends, that's called formation. It forms your mind and heart into a grateful mind and heart. And that is something that people can see. It draws people to faith. When they meet you and see, no matter what else is going on in your life or not going on in your life, that you have a grateful heart. So one thing every day for which you're grateful. And the third kind of pillar, I think, of someone whose faith draws other people to the faith is, for what are you prayerful? Remember, this pulls you right back into this I-thou relationship with God. What is it this morning when you wake up, or at night whenever you use the devotional? What is it that you are bringing to God in prayer? Now, it could be something for which you're grateful, but it could also be something for which you are scared for another person. So it just says one word, something for which you are prayerful. So again, it could be just a person's name. You could write the same name for 10 days in a row. You could write a different name every day. You could write your name. But you're hitting all three of those pillars of the life of faith that draws other people to the faith. You know what your relationship with God is. You're aware of what it is. Good, bad, or ugly, you are aware of what it is. You are grateful. Because you know what? No matter what you feel like your relationship with God, I hope there's still things in your life for which you're grateful. And that can kind of balance, especially if you're not really sure where you are with God. Well, then figure out, for what are you grateful? It's a good way back if you're feeling a little wayward in your relationship with God. And then, of course, the third, for what are you prayerful? That is to say, it sets your mind on the fact that faith is not some set of rituals. This is a relationship with God. Who is in relationship with the world? It's a story unfolding. And what do you want to see next? What do you need next? Ask. Jesus says ask. Okay, so that's just the first three things, and I hope you'll realize that's only 3 words. So this could be really a quick devotional time for you if you're that kind of person. Very quickly, though, I move into what I call epic inspiration. Now, I could have put prayers, I could have put Bible verses, but that's not what I do first. I just ask those 3 questions about your life, and then we dive into a series of quotations, one each day, from the Narnia series, all of the Chronicles of Narnia, Harry Potter, Star Wars, and Lord of the Rings. I picked those 4 epics because no matter how old someone is, I can't tell you how often in the last decade or so of my life, people have shared with me how much those epic stories mean to them, how they get like fired up for goodness, for formation and discipleship and fellowship. So I decided to put those quotations in each day. And there's one day that's a Harry Potter day every week, and one day that's a Star Wars day. I originally thought of putting all 4 epics, a quote from each one each day. But the truth is, let's be realistic. We know that people spend no more than 5 to 8 minutes on a daily devotional, people that are able to do it. So I was trying to keep it short. So instead, depending which day it is, you're only going to hear from that epic. So what I try to do is pick quotations from those stories or movies that actually match where we are in the liturgical year, or match some of the other themes that will come out of the readings for that day. And I'm doing something here. I'm up to something here. It's not just that these are great epic stories that have great 1 or 2 line passages about things that would be meaningful to a person of faith. It's that what we know about the brain is these epic stories inspire us in literally different parts of the brain than the normal, what you call rational thought or intellectual thought. And what I'm trying to do is present the faith as this epic invitation for you. So it made sense to just throw out some of these characters and some of these words that some of you will just recognize, something that Yoda says to you. And I'm hoping that inspires that part of your brain before we move further into the daily reading for the Breviary, that inspires you to start to think of yourself as a member of a fellowship of people. So the goal of the epic reading section is that you feel that you want to do something with your life. That's what I feel when I see those other epics. I also want to fight darkness and evil. I also want to care for the vulnerable. I also want to be a part of the rescue of the world. So that's why those epic quotations are in there. It's meant to just sort of wake up this other part of your brain. And then, after we've woken up that other part of your brain, moving into the collects of the day. Another purpose of this breviary is to introduce people to the Book of Common Prayer if you haven't used it on sort of a daily basis in your life, or maybe you haven't used it much at all. So there's usually then an actual collect from the Book of Common Prayer. It could be the collect for the week, and during Lent, it's the collect for each day. You may not have known this, that in Lent there is actually separate prayers for the 3rd Tuesday in Lent, or the 2nd Wednesday in Lent. So there'll be the actual prayers. But the idea is you've had these 3 questions to sort of figure out where you are with God, for what you're grateful, and then what are you prayerful, and then be thrown into an epic to remind you that this is an epic journey you're on in faith. And then boom, we go right into where we are in the liturgical year. So there is a short collect there. Then there is what I'm calling an ancient theological reading. Now, the truth is, not all of them are ancient. Some of them are as early as the 2nd century, but they run up to Thomas Aquinas. So there's a little bit of medieval source in there. But on the whole, these are short sermons from people really from the 3rd to maybe the 5th or the 6th century. It's voices many of you haven't heard, but it's amazing to watch in those sermons to see our faith unfolding over time, our understanding of the Eucharist, our understanding of the Trinity. There are some great sermons in there before the Council of Chalcedon, before the Council of Nicaea. You're actually watching the faith grow and see how passionate people are who have so few resources, so few of the church councils that would come later to define our creeds. But look at what they say. And the stakes are so high. Some of these readings come from a time where Christians were being eaten alive for their faith by lions. So I hope that giving these brief historical readings, and you'll see in the breviary where they come from, and if you want to go read more about them. And they all match the liturgical seasons as well. So you'll read ones that are about Lent during Lent. You'll read ones that are about Holy Week during Holy Week. But it's meant to just throw you in for a paragraph or two to hear these ancient voices and connect you to this long, epic story of our faith. Again, you're going to read some things in there that are not inclusive language or not post-colonial. I mean, they definitely don't represent, obviously, the history of growth and maturity in our tradition. But it's amazing to see the kinds of things people were thinking so long ago. And it's like sitting down and having a quick cup of coffee with someone from our ancient voices and the wisdom that can come from that. When that's done, the other thing that we have each day is an antiphon. Now, it's described in the beginning of the book if you don't know what an antiphon is, but these are sort of ancient lines of chant. We actually find some evidence that antiphons were used really during the Acts of the Apostles. It's actually a Jewish tradition in the temple of people reciting or chanting back and forth to one another. You take a turn, I take a turn. And they have, they're composed of psalms or other lines of scripture and deep theological convictions. Sometimes the antiphon just talks about that Jesus rose from the dead, alleluia. So I put antiphons in there, not just to introduce you to some of the oldest lines of theological conviction in our tradition, because it goes over centuries. It's where the 5th century that we start getting formal antiphons, but they're taken really from before that. But I want you to have this feeling that when you're sitting alone reading this breviary, that you're actually chanting, and I want you to imagine the communion of saints, that other people who are also reading this book are also saying the antiphons. It's just one line. And there are different kinds depending on the day and the week in the liturgical year. There are different ones in Lent. There are different antiphons in Advent. Some of you may have heard those before. But again, the antiphons you'll find in here actually follow the daily office and follow the day and the season of the year in which we find them. So I hope that when you see that line, that's you speaking to the fellowship of other people who are also reading this particular breviary and putting you into fellowship with the communion of saints. Some of those antiphons have been said for over 1,500 years. So just open your mouth wherever you live, in your apartment, in your dorm room, and say it out loud. You are not alone when you say that. You are responding to, adding your voice to a great series of chants about theological truths that go back centuries. So that's the idea, that you would read through these Monday through Thursday. And the last thing I'll say is Fridays are different. Now, many of you know from Holy Week that Good Friday is obviously a different day than other days. You know that Sesame Street song, some of these things are not like the other? Well, definitely, Good Friday is different than any other day that week. But if you actually read our Book of Common Prayer, every Friday is what's called a penitential day, a day of reflection on your relationship with God. And a way to kind of reset going into the weekend, into the following week, to take responsibility for things done and left undone during the week. And it's a tradition, again, in our church to read what's called the Examen. This book explains in the beginning what the Examen is. Some of you are very familiar with it. Others of you have probably never heard of it. That's the whole point. We're trying to give you resources from our tradition. And an Examen is just 3 or 4 questions that you read through that help you kind of take a look at your week. Think of it like spiritual direction. So every Friday we take a break from the epic narratives, and it's not because we don't want to talk about Star Wars or Harry Potter anymore. It's because the epic narrative every Friday is, what is your journey? How is it going? It's where you reflect on your epic journey. So every Friday it lists the questions of the Examen and helps you read through them. So that's really everything that's in here, and that's why it's in here. One of the main reasons I felt like I needed to make a video is some of you see that the word evangelist is on the cover, and then it really doesn't appear anywhere else in the book. So you may say, well, what makes everything I just said training in evangelism? Well, my friends, it is my deep conviction, and it's my observation from studying people who have tried to form people who form faith in other people. The great observation to me is that when a person is going deeper in their faith, deeper in their relationship with God, that's not the only kind of evangelism, but it's the beginning of any kind of holy evangelism. What makes this book for an evangelist is because it invites you to have a deeper relationship with God, to make more space in your life for God. And when that happens, anyone who encounters you in person, online, in writing, in singing, what they're experiencing is more of the love of Christ. What I find is that when I've made space for God in my life and I'm excited about something I'm learning, it just people can tell. People know when they're with someone who are on fire for what they believe. So there's deep theology in here. There's serious spiritual practice. There's an opportunity to have community with people, the living and the dead in the communion of saints. And for you to know what's going on with your relationship with God at any given moment. In my experience, that is how you set an evangelist on fire, because it's God who will use you. When I go deeper, I draw more people into the life of faith. When I aim to draw people into the life of faith and don't spend my time going deeper, what I'm really drawing people to is myself. So here you go, my friends. Don't worry how late in the cycle that you started, and I hope that you will join us on the Facebook page for Evangelism Formation. I'll put the link here. Join the group. You can just join. There's about 800 people who are in that group, and I will be posting each week information, background information about the antiphons that we're reading that week, the liturgical season. I'll say something maybe about the Harry Potter or Star Wars quotation. I've decided that we really need a kind of a community online for people who are reading this breviary and who want to share their thoughts. You could share your thought every day if you wanted. So go ahead and join that. Find the link below this video. Join that Facebook group, and that way you can be reading this on your own, doing it on your own, but having a community of people to share your insights. My friends, I hope you have a wonderful Lent, an epic Lent, and an incredible experience of Easter this year. It may be COVID, but we are going deeper. We are not deterred by the challenges, the huge challenges personally and for the church right now. What is our response going to be? What the response for the church that is of God has always been. When things get darker, we go deeper. Peace be with you, my friend.